So welcome everybody to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio, and today is Monday, July the 10th, 2023, and their call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us, and we would love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And wait for Michael to get dialed in and see if he has something else he wants to do, or if he wants me to read first. And we've had last week, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, I actually pulled those shows out and have combined them into two 2-hour shows, and I'll have them on the website under special shows. And I don't have them up there yet, but I will. So, Michael, I didn't know if you had something else you wanted to do before I started reading, or what?
I was going to talk about that a little bit about the that documentary series that we watched.
Oh, sure.
And for me, opens up so much understanding about what's going on in the world, especially the political world today. But and there's one particular part that I found I had to do some work and some breathing around, and it explains why I think all of a sudden, I think there's kind of a critical mass thing been hit. There's so much violence coming into the political arena the last few years. But the series is on Amazon. It's called Shiny Happy People, and it's a story about a cult, basically, and it touches so many arenas in terms of looking at the power person dynamic, looking at what's going on in the world. Why are people supposedly, quote unquote, good people willing to do violence, standing for guns, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. But one of the things they exposed was, this is a story about a faith-based organization that involves several different religions, going around and teaching in different religious settings. Stated goal, which, when you think about it, I'll leave those comments. But the stated goal, one of the stated goals, is to take over government, the American government, via religious training for young people and putting them into positions of power in America. And part of the training is, as infants, apparently this training, they didn't say how long it went on, but it starts at about 6 months of age. And it's called blanket training. What they do is they put a child about 6 months of age on a blanket, laying on their back, and just out of reach, they put something, attractive to them, something they'd be attracted to. And every time the child reaches for that something, they hit them, and hit them, and hit them, and hit them until the child stops reaching. And they called it breaking the rebellious spirit of Satan in them. So taking a child at 6 months, which is just mind-boggling, and physically abusing them because they're reaching for something in the world, training that the old condemn the world is bad, evil, blah, 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 and don't have any part in it. I just found so shocking. And that the abuse that's coming into, there used to be some modicum of decency in the political world, and they've blamed a certain politician for the violence. And I've had that thought too, not mentioning any names, but I see the wider, I think perhaps that particular politician is a manifestation of this mindset that's so violent that they take their own infants them for simply reaching for something that the parents put in front of the child. There are several big-name politicians, some who've run for the White House, some who've worked in the White House, who were part of that training. The group was located in Arkansas, and it's interesting that one of the other things they exposed was that they forced the children to work without pay. And recently there was a fine for a cleaning company that cleaned slaughterhouses around the country. And it was like a $1.5 million fine for having underage children working in slaughterhouses on dangerous equipment with dangerous chemicals. At a very short period of time after that fine happened in Arkansas, the governor of Arkansas, someone who worked in the White House for about 4 years, was instrumental in passing a law which is being worked on in several states, and got the law passed, signed it into law. This is supposedly from people who have family values, that makes it easier for these kinds of integrity-free businesses who would utilize kids as young as 13 working on dangerous equipment with dangerous chemicals within their companies. It's like, what is going on? And as we become aware of what goes on, of course, only then can we, number one, do the work to clean up in us whatever comes up, whatever surfaces, so that we can stand as a space to bring accountability and healing to circumstances and situations like this. And it just feels like an appropriate piece of information for everyone to be aware of, so that we can stand in a space of healing for these kinds of dynamics in our world. If people don't know what they're dealing with, it's difficult to sometimes spot what's going on. I'm not sure what else to say about it. You have any thoughts, Jeannie? It was a shocking series. It was, what, four sessions on Amazon. Shiny, happy people. Do you have any thoughts to add to that, sweetie?
Yeah, the other thing was that the girls, they made them, I mean, basically they were dressed with like collars up to their chins and all the way down to their ankles, and they had to wear like pantaloons underneath and all of this stuff. And they, I mean, even to the point, they said that if a girl was sexually assaulted, and in the series, there were a couple of the girls that actually their brother did them, and that it was the girl's fault that, you know, men can't control their mind. And so if the girl, you know, shows an ankle or wears a collar too low or something like that, that they have asked for it to happen, and that there is a lesson in there, and they should actually feel blessed that they were raped, because that means that God has more work for them to do. And they even took tampons away from them because they were accused of trying to destroy their own virginity and not saving themselves for their husband. And they wouldn't let them, you know, kiss or pleasure. Anything. Yeah, they would put, and I told Michael there were so many things in there that I saw growing up. You know, we weren't part of this group, but there's bound to have been, you know, I think that a lot of the preachers that we had, and they were, you know, fundamentalists, and that, like, for instance, at camp, they would come around with a stick that was 6 inches long, and there had to be at least that much space between a boy and a girl, that their legs couldn't be touching or their hands couldn't be touching or whatever. And girls swam at a different time than boys. They weren't allowed to, see them in their bathing suits, even if it was a one piece that went down to their knee. And, just different things like that. But then it turned around by the end of the program that some of the leaders were actually doing sexual assaults on the girls. And, so it was like such a
and covering it up.
You've got to keep yourself pure, but it's okay if I do it to you. And it was just crazy. And they worked their children like their own children. Like it's part of it is the family that you've probably seen on TV. That it's like 19 and counting. They've got like 19 children, and they believe that God will determine when the children quit coming. That you can't do anything to stop, getting pregnant or whatever. And they would take their children. I mean, they'd have the little ones out there. They had to build a bigger house because there were so many of them. And they made the children, like, dig the ditches for the foundations of the home and things like that. And they made, once the girls reached around the age of 10 or 11, then they were required to basically raise the younger children that were coming up because there were just too many children for the mother and father to take care of. So the children had to take care of the children. And they interviewed a lot of the kids, and they said, what they regretted was, or what they would like to have back is their childhood, that they didn't have a childhood. And they were sent to the organization had different facilities, whether it was to be trained like kind of militarily, or whether they were to be tested for, their ability to, maybe work computers or something. But they wouldn't let the children, they were all homeschooled, they would not let them go to a public school, and they told them it was ridiculous. They didn't need to learn the math and the things like that they needed to learn how to obey, and that God was first, and then the father, and then the mother, and then the children. And I mean, even the mothers would look at the fathers like with these, sleepy eyes and smile, and it was just so fake.
Yeah, there's one scene where they have caught on film a well-known Arkansas politician, like national level. In fact, I sign up for different newsletters and things to keep track of it. And I actually get a text from this group that's just about as fake as they were showing on the show about how to vote, who you should be voting for. And I get these texts from them all the time. And they catch this fellow on camera trying to cover up the pedophilia of one of the children of the family that's in that TV series 19 and counting. And a couple years later, the kid, the young man, is sentenced to 12 years in prison for child pornography. It's just like, and they've actually got this guy on film. I mean, he knows this kid has been sexually active or abusive with his sisters, and he tries to cover up. And they got him on camera trying to cover it up. I mean, it's just like,
and he tells the girls that
stuff.
He tells them that they are shameful for saying that their brother, attacked them, or that he was a pedophile or whatever, that he knew their brother and he knew their father, and they were good people, and the girls needed to keep their mouth shut and stay in line. I mean, it's like crazy.
And it's just something I bring it up to invite everybody to think about. And it will, for me at least, it made a lot more things drop in places to why the politics and why the violence in just the last few years. And it's just a big wake-up call, big wake-up call. It would seem that any organization, and they claim they've had about 2.5 million people through their program since 1961. So they've been around 82 years. And it would seem like it's sedition to have a stated goal of putting their people into the government and taking over with forcing the government to basically be a theocracy based in their interpretation of Christianity. That's where we're heading. And, if you look historically, the Founding Fathers were pretty bright when they said separation of church and state, because there's no theocracy, at least none that I know of, that didn't eventually turn into exactly what these people are doing. It's just pretty wild. But I think in our modern world, this is this influence. 2.5 million people. And again, if I mention the names of some of the politicians, you'd know them very well from the White House and Congress and such. And how it's influencing our society, our world. It just makes so much sense of some of the attacks that are going on, whether it's the LGBTQ community or, banning books. Florida, they banned the book, The Life of Rosa Parks. Like, why would you ban a book on the life of Rosa Parks? Pretty powerful historical. I guess you don't want women thinking they can speak up. I don't know. It's just crazy. So if that aroused any thoughts for you, you have a conversation, something to share, question, thought, our call-in number, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show. And then if you push 1, we'll be having a conversation. So what's on your mind? How can we support you? What's exciting in your world? I know one of the exciting things in our world is I just spent the morning working on our new compost pile. We've created a new compost pile that's about 40 feet long and about 5 feet wide and about 3 feet deep. And so today was my day for going out with the tiller and tilling it all up and getting it rolling on another level. So the garden is just, we're overwhelmed with food growing in the garden, which is pretty awesome. That's a fun project we've been engaged in. Other than that, we're just kind of rocking forward.
We have tomatoes and squash and zucchini, cucumbers, the okra's coming on, carrots are coming up.
Cauliflower.
The lettuce is about 4 feet tall. Broccoli, cabbages, and the tomatoes are big tomatoes and cherry tomatoes, and they're just all going wild. So it's really nice.
Had bruschetta, fresh bruschetta out of the garden. The herbs, it was just awesome. So pretty cool, pretty sweet. So if somebody has any other thoughts, let's go to the reading.
All right. So we were reading in the chapter called Far, Far Beyond. It's chapter 13. And this is Michael Singer's book called The Untethered Soul. And where we left off was talking about going beyond always means letting go of the effort to keep things within your defined limits. So there are 2 ways you can live. You can devote your life to staying in your comfort zone, or you can work on your freedom. In other words, you can devote your whole life to the process of making sure everything fits within your limited model, or you can devote your life to freeing yourself from the limits of your model. To understand this better, let's take a trip to the zoo. Imagine that you're having a great time until you see a tiger inside a small cage. He says causes. This triggers you to contemplate what would be like to live the rest of your life in such tight confinement. The very thought is extremely frightening to you. But in truth, the confines of your comfort zone create such a cage. This inner cage doesn't limit your body. It limits the expanse of your consciousness. Because you are unable to go outside your comfort zone, you are, in essence, locked in confinement. If you examine this, you will see that you're willing to stay in this cage because you're afraid. Your comfort zone is familiar to you. Beyond it is the unknown. To fully appreciate this, just imagine the most paranoid person you have ever met in your entire life. He's so scared. Every moment of his life he thinks somebody's trying to hurt him. If you offer him that tiger's cage, he might accept your offer. He doesn't see it as being locked in a cage. He sees it as protection from what could harm him. That which looks like prison to you looks like safety to him. What if a security service came to your house and bolted down all the doors and barred all the windows? If you happened to be inside at the time, would you panic and want to get out, or would you thank them for helping you feel safe? Most people have the second reaction when it comes to limitations of their psyche. They want to stay in there and feel safe. They don't say, "Get me out of here. I'm locked in this tiny world in which everything has to be a certain way. I have to worry about what everybody's doing, what I look like, and everything I've ever said. I want out." Instead of wanting out, they try to keep their cage stable. If something is not comfortable, they do whatever they must to protect themselves and get back to the feeling of safety. If you've ever done that, it means you love your cage. When the cage of the psyche got rattled, you fixed it so that you could be comfortable inside. When you truly awake spiritually, you realize you are caged. You wake up and realize that you can hardly move in there. You're constantly hitting the limits of your comfort zone. You see that you're afraid to tell people what you really think. You see that you're too self-conscious to freely express yourself. You see that you have to stay on top of everything in order to be okay. Why? There's really no reason. You have set these limits on yourself. If you don't stay within them, you get scared. You feel hurt and you feel threatened. That's your cage. The tiger knows the limits of his cage when he hits the bars. You know the limits of your cage when the psyche starts to resist. Your bars are the outer boundary of your comfort zone. The minute you come to the edge of your cage, it lets you know it in no uncertain terms. Let's look at this edge by way of an example. In the old days, if you wanted to keep your dog in the backyard, you had to put up a fence. Nowadays, you don't need a fence because everything is electric. You just bury wires underground and put a little collar on the dog, and the dog thinks, "Hey, I'm free. I used to have to be inside a fence. This is great." Of course, he goes running right to where he's not supposed to, and zap. He jumps back and barks. What happened? An invisible limit was there, and when the dog approached that limit, it gave him a shock. It hurt. It was uncomfortable enough so that now the dog feels fear whenever he approaches the boundaries. So you see, a cage doesn't have to look like a cage. It can be a cage created by your fear of discomfort. If you approach your limits, you begin to feel uncomfortable and insecure. Those are the bars of your cage. As long as you stay inside of it, you cannot possibly know what's on the other side. Boundaries of this cage are what make your world appear finite and temporal. The infinite and eternal are just outside the limits of your cage. Going beyond means going beyond the borders of the cage. There should be no cage. The soul is infinite. It is free to expand everywhere. It is free to experience all of life. This can only happen when you are willing to face reality without mental boundaries. If you still have barriers, and you know what they are because you hit them every day, you must be willing to go beyond them. Otherwise, you remain within your cage. And remember, decorating your cage with beautiful experiences, fond memories, and great dreams is not the same as going beyond. A cage by any other name is still a cage. You must be willing to go beyond. Throughout each day, you frequently hit the edges of your cage, and when you hit those edges, you either pull back or you try to force things to change so that you can remain comfortable. You actually use the brilliance of your mind to stay inside your cage. Day and night, you plot and plan how to stay within your comfort zone. Sometimes you can't even fall asleep at night because you're too busy thinking about what you need to do to stay within your cage. How can I make it so that she will never leave me? How can I keep her from ever becoming interested in someone else? You're trying to figure out how to be sure you won't hit the edges of your cage. Let's go back to the dog. Since that particular dog was used to roaming free, it's a sad day when he stops trying to get out of the yard. The only reason he would stop trying to go beyond his little space is that he's afraid of the edges. But what if you're dealing with a very brave dog that's determined to be free? Imagine that the dog has not given up. You find him sitting there right at the place where the collar starts vibrating, and he's not backing off. Every minute he's stepping forward a little bit more in order to get used to the force field. If he continues, he will eventually get out. There's not a chance in the world that he won't. Since it's just an artificial edge, he can get through if he can learn to withstand the discomfort. He just has to be ready, willing, and able to handle the discomfort. The collar cannot actually hurt him. It's just uncomfortable. If he's willing to go beyond his comfort zone, he's free to come and go at will. Your cage is just like this. When you approach the edges, you feel insecurity, jealousy, fear, or self-consciousness. You pull back, and if you're like most people, you stop trying. Spirituality begins when you decide you'll never stop trying. Spirituality is the commitment to go beyond, no matter what it takes. It's an infinite journey based upon going beyond yourself every minute of every day for the rest of your life. If you're truly going beyond, you are always at your limits. You're never back in the comfort zone. A spiritual being feels as though they are always against that edge. They're constantly being pushed through it. Eventually, you will realize that it cannot actually hurt you to go beyond your psychological limits. If you are willing to just stand at the edge and keep walking, you will go beyond. You used to pull back when it got uncomfortable. Now you relax and go past that point. That is all it takes to go beyond. Go beyond where you were a minute ago by handling what's happening now. Would you like to go beyond? Would you like to feel no edges? Imagine a comfort zone that is so expanded that it can easily fit the entire day no matter what happens. The day unfolds and the mind doesn't say anything. You simply interact with the day with a peaceful, fully inspired heart. If your edges happen to get hit, the mind doesn't complain. It just passes through. This is how great beings live. When you are trained, like a great athlete, to immediately relax through your edges, when they get hit, then it's all over. You'll realize that you will always be fine. Nothing can ever bother you except your edges, and now you know what to do with them. You end up loving your edges because they point your way to freedom. All you have to do is constantly relax and lean into them. Then one day, when you least expect it, you'll fall through into the infinite. That is what it means to go beyond.
And when you apply forgiveness to the edges in your mind, and everything that is accompanied in the mind by some form of hostility or fear is an edge. And what happens with forgiveness is that you have the opportunity to drop into those aspects of mind which reflect in physiology and remove the limits, remove the edges. Interestingly, and how close he is in his definition there, in the Aramaic language, there's a proper translation for the words kingdom of heaven is one as the community of love and also as the kingdom of expansion. So to expand into love, to move away from the restrictions created by hostility and fear and expand into the truth of who we are, changes everything, And it's interesting, you know, I spoke in the beginning of the show about that docuseries, and just to watch how brutally someone would, with their own children, use physical abuse, I mean with an infant, a child of 6, in order to put edges in order to make sure you never go outside of, unbelievable, that you never go outside of that limit by physical reinforcement of punishment if you do reach beyond an edge. I mean, just that young an age. I mean, how crazy is that? Definitely a big wake-up call for healing and bringing a proper understanding of what those ancient teachings were about. You know, it's interesting. We live in a culture that, the last count I checked on, we had about 32,000 different sects of so-called Christianity. Now, I'd offer there's only one Christianity. There's one set of principles that were taught by a man named Yeshua 2,000 years ago. It's physics, it's physiology, it's psychology, it's genetics. It's about how life works. And then we have people who have edges, in Michael Singer's language, people who have edges who look at that and say, here's what that means, and they install and instill their edges on the teaching. And by doing so, totally and completely distort and destroy it. Facing those edges, facing the generational patterns of hostility and fear, stepping into them consciously, purposely, as the presence of love, is a major challenge in order to really express who we are as human beings. And that's what this work is dedicated to. And when somebody tells you they know what it's all about, in fact, one of the scenes, the person who started this particular organization says, I have all of the answers for you. If you find somebody's got all the answers, better turn tail and run. You're in trouble. We don't have any answers here. We have tools. We have tools. We've gone to the Aramaic and decoded the tools with which each person can push back their edges, can open into that expansion. But as far as answers, don't have them. More questions than answers. Principles, tools. How do you heal a mind that's been limited through punishment or just through generational ignorance of the principles of who we are as human beings, as the created essence of a human being? And that if you listen to the commitment, the opening lines of the commitment, promise to trust enough to tell you the truth and treat you lovingly, gently, and with respect. There's a principle into the space where they get to experience who they are as love, where the mind, what we call the non-being mind, would install its limits in every other mind. Another really, in the context of this conversation about this docuseries, again, it's called Shiny Happy People on Amazon. The cages, using Michael's metaphor, that people get put in mentally are just unbelievable. And I forget who it was that said it, but something to the effect of, you can't get out of a prison if you don't know you're in one. Difficult to tell if you're not fully awakened as a human being. Difficult to tell what is limit and what is true if you're not experiencing yourself as the human being that you are, as the created active presence of love. And so the objective of this work is to open space for that experience and to have a guidepost. And the simple guidepost is it based in hostility or fear? Then it's not human. It doesn't belong in your mind. It doesn't belong in your emotions. It doesn't belong in your body. Well, what do I do about it? Forgive, forgive, forgive. Now, never forgive anyone, including yourself, but forgive continuously. recognizing that forgiveness isn't about what most of churchianity has taught us, that it's about letting somebody else off the hook because our physiology is producing something traumatic. If I'm in pain and you happen to be present, there's nothing for me to forgive you for. No reason for me to let you off the hook because my physiology is producing something. What I want is a tool with which to go into my own physiology and remove whatever the block is. That's forgiveness. Pardoning, Greek idea, is what most of the world's been taught, is forgiveness. People drive around in their cars with little bumper stickers that say, I've been forgiven. Well, you've got somebody there that's not living in truth, because you will never be forgiven for anything. And the reason you'll never be forgiven for anything is because you can't be forgiven for anything, because forgiveness isn't about letting you off the hook. So there's some confusion in most minds to be worked through to really take hold of these tools and put them to work in their lives. And the whole purpose of this conversation has been going on for the last 13 years, I guess. We're into the 13th year now, I think. Hour a day, 5 days a week. Purpose of the conversation is to push back those walls, to expand into the truth of who we are, individually and collectively. Not for any other purpose than simply to experience life as a true human being. So, Ms. G, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, it's all quiet. There was a new person in the chat room, and they said, I'm new to your channel, and I could really use some healing. And I wrote, and I said, well, welcome. How can we support you? And they disconnected. So hopefully they'll call in.
That would be cool.
To, be of support to you. So if you're on the line, we had a hand go up. I believe this is Audrey, 520. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hey there, young lady. Welcome. Good morning. Good to hear your voice.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. I had tuned in earlier, was listening, and then I had a phone call come in, so I unmuted and tuned out. And then I tuned back in again. And I wanted to share an experience this morning. A person had called me. To cancel a group, and the person was saying that she was experiencing sinus problems. So I replied, I wonder what sinusitis is representative of. When we got, she was telling me what was going on with her life. And when I got off the phone, I went to Louise Can Heal Your Life, and I looked at sinus. And it absolutely correlated to exactly what she was experiencing.
Really?
And it gave the affirmations. And Louise Hay book is a tool. Your processing is a tool. There's many tools, but I believe that discordant energy that we experience gets, let's say, trapped into areas in our life to alert us what is going on. Our body is a communication device. And I want to thank you, Michael. And I mean, this book, your processing, many other tools, such as Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life, and the EFT, so many modes of healing are out there for us to experience. And I'm in awe of how this is coming together for me. And I just wanted to express and thank you.
Well, thank you for saying thank you, and you're welcome and deserving. And tell us what Louise had to say about sinuses.
It was saying, in fact, I'll read it. Sinus problems, irritation to one person, someone close. And then the affirmation is, I declare peace and harmony indwell me and surround me at all times. All is well. From her book.
Cool. So I would add one level to that conversation, and I'd agree fully that that's what probably is at the root of many physiological expressions of things like sinus. However, I disagree with the affirmation game, because if my unconscious holds something that goes against the affirmation, each time I use the affirmation, and the power is in the unconscious, each time I use the affirmation, I'm reinforcing whatever its opposite is in the unconscious. So what I suggest people do is turn the affirmation into a mind shifter. You know, the title of this radio show is Mind Shifters Radio. And a mind shifter is what most people call an affirmation, except that what one does is you take a piece of paper, divide it down the middle, and on the left-hand side of the page, write the mind shifter, what is now a mind shifter, what's called the affirmation, and then allow everything in your mind that goes against it to come to the surface. Use that as a catalyst and write down everything that comes up in response. So in response to that particular mind shifter, one's mind might say, well, that's not true. There's no peace in my life. Well, you know, just look at what happened with Charlie yesterday. Well, you know, one of these days I'll get even with, and so using what most people just, you know, as I see it, most people use affirmations to try to force something to be true that isn't true. Where in this work, we define a mind shifter as a thought about an issue in your life around which you have negative thoughts, and it's the opportunity to surface, process, and release the negative thoughts. So turning every affirmation into a mind shifter gives one the opportunity to start to process the unconscious dynamic that's, you know, reflecting in the body or reflecting out in the world. Just takes things to another level. But I'm right with Louise A. on that cause behind sinus issues.
Thank you, because recently I had gone to a workshop by Jonathan Lenz here in Tucson, Arizona, in Unity. And he had this formula on the board. And it was an equation with brackets.
Right.
It's T plus B, brackets closed. And on the top, it's on the outside of the brackets, it's F equals QL. Okay, so thought plus belief accentuated by the feeling equals quality of life. And I resonate with what you just said, because so often the unconscious programming. So we shift the program. We shift the program and do the work. And as your process of the form, as we do the
reality management worksheet.
Right.
The forgiveness process, yes.
As the worksheet, it shifts from the unconscious to the conscious, and the shift takes place, and we no longer are responding to the unconscious, but make it conscious. And that's where the healing takes place. Am I correct in my observation
You're right on track.
of the workshop?
You're right on track. Carl
Thank
Jung.
you.
Carl Jung has a
Yes.
really powerful quote on that topic, and let me see if I can bring it to mind. I don't remember the exact wording, but the basic idea is that which one holds in their unconscious will direct their lives, and people will call it fate, that's where they end up. Oh, well, that's just fate. It's like, no, you're a creator, and the power to create, when you set up this unconscious mind, the power is held in the unconscious. In the ancient
Yes.
teachings, it was called the heart. And, sooner or later, we need to open that veil of the temple, so to speak, that barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious, face what's there, and face it out of a space of conscious, active, present love, which means whatever that unconscious dynamic is it begins to dissolve. And literally getting rid of the unconscious, nothing sneaks up on you because you're not creating your life out of an unconscious condition. We've got to get rid of that veil, that barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious. The churchianity interpreted the veil of the temple as, a purple curtain in the church. But it's not. The temple is our own physical form. That's the temple. And it's the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious that keeps us wondering, the title of my book, why is this happening to me again? Never realizing
Yes.
that the reason is because what I'm holding, what I'm creating, keeps coming back to bite me, and until I face it, can't change it. And the mind shifter is a way to bring what it is that I'm hiding from myself to conscious awareness so I can embrace it in love and be freed from it.
Yes, thank you, because computer, and I am the computer programmer. And when I operate from the unconscious in a distorted, in distortion energy, and I'm not conscious of it, how in the world am I going to change the program? There is the answer, and the answer of one of the tools, it's a great tool, is the worksheet. And I
It's powerful.
understand now. Yes, it is a powerful tool.
Right. And my offering is you are neither of the things that you just said you are. The truth is you are love.
Yes, yes.
The truth of each of us is love. And when we're unconscious, we're just rolling out the programs of the generations. That story of the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years was not about being in a 35 square mile hot sandy place for 40 years. That's kind of ridiculous. It was about being locked and lost in the unconscious. The desert, it's a place of suffering. And the alternative to that was to go to the promised land. What did they say in that story, which is just a metaphor for life for people? What did they say in that story had to happen to get out of the desert and go to the promised land, which is simply conscious co-creation? What had to happen, they said, was the old generation had to die off. And that didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in the unconscious had to be processed through. Otherwise, we were lost in the unconscious or the desert. And we're not designed for that. We're designed to be conscious, creative beings, knowing ourselves as the stuff of love and bringing that into expression in our world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be exposed to the worksheet.
Just doing our jobs, young lady.
Blessings.
All right. Delight to hear from you.
Thank you.
All right. Lots of love and blessings. Take care. Bye-bye. Miss Jeannie, we've got about 10 minutes left. Do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, it is all quiet on the home front.
So if you're out there in listener land, and if you happen to be on one of those stations where we can't see you in our control panel, if you call in to the show from your phone, the call-in number is 563-999-3581, 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show directly. And then if you push 1, through the magic of technology, and thank you to Blog Talk Radio, we deeply appreciate what they facilitate for us, what they offer to us at a very reasonable cost. So when you push 1, that'll raise a hand in the control panel. Technology is amazing. And we'll be having a conversation. So what's on your mind? How can we support you? We're down to about 10 minutes, and there's perfect time for another good conversation. Maybe even 2. So if you have a thought for us, do it now. Don't wait till the last minute. And let's talk about it. How can we support you? What's on your mind? Well, Ms. Jeannie, I'm complete. Have you got any other thoughts to add?
No. Maybe announce one more time about if people are interested in doing an online intuitive development.
Yes, that kind of looks like it's developing. And so we haven't set a date as yet, but it looks like it's going to probably be a 10-week intensive. It'll be a Saturday and a Sunday for 10 weeks straight. And or if we set it up where there's a holiday in the middle, we might take a week off. But it kind of depends how it comes together. So if you're interested in joining us for Intuitive Development, it'll be a practicum on how to, we'll step into the forgiveness process, but then how to access information without reference to your mind, without reference to the past, but really how to awaken the higher faculties so that we don't need eyes, ears, taste, touch, smell, hearing. We don't need those things. We can directly access the actuality rather than go through the instrument of senses, which tends to keep us locked in the information that's already stored within the mind and the body. So how to step up and beyond that is what intuitive development is all about. We'll do the why is this happening to me again experience. We'll do what my healing's going to look like, and then we'll step into the intuitive development practicum. So if you're interested in participating in that, if you've got Jeannie's number or mine, give us a call. And or you can simply send Jeannie an email. Her email is jeanie@whyagain.org. So Jeannie@whyagain.org. Drop her a note saying you're interested, and make sure to give us your name and phone number, and I'll get back to you and see what your vote is on timing and such, and we'll look at when that's going to come together. So if you're out there in listener land, you have a thought for us, I would prefer to continue the conversation. We've got about 6 minutes left, I guess. And so if you've got a conversation, push 1, let's talk about it. Otherwise, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. And blessings. Bye-bye.